I never thought my words would come back to haunt me. For years, I laughed at people who wore MAGA hats, calling them foolish, blind, or brainwashed. I mocked their faith in God, their hope in America, and their devotion to what I thought was just politics. I wore my pride like a badge, convinced that I was smarter, freer, and better than them. But all of that came crashing down on a night I never expected. Driving home from a late party, tired and distracted, I lost control of my car on a wet stretch of road. The last thing I remember was the screech of tires, the sound of glass shattering, and then silence. In an instant, I was floating above the wreck, watching paramedics trying desperately to pull me from the twisted metal. Their voices were frantic, calling for oxygen, pressing on my chest, shining lights in my eyes. But I wasn't there anymore. Not really. My body was below, broken and bleeding, but I was hovering in a strange calm, detached and terrified all at once. I wanted to scream that I wasn't ready, that I had more life to live, but no sound came. Instead, the darkness began to close in, swallowing the flashing red and blue lights of the ambulance, pulling me deeper into something I couldn't understand. That darkness felt endless, like falling into a pit with no bottom. Fear gripped me tighter than anything I had ever felt. Memories flashed, moments of mockery, laughter. The times I ridiculed faith and dismissed the cross as meaningless. Each scene hit me like a blow, as if the very fabric of my life was unraveling in judgment before my eyes. I wanted to turn away, to hide, but I couldn't. It was all there, undeniable and raw. The pride I had worn so boldly now felt like chains dragging me down into the abyss. And just as I thought I would be consumed forever, a faint light pierced the darkness, a single glow growing stronger, pulling me toward it. The light drew me in with a force I couldn't resist. It wasn't like the glare of the sun or a spotlight. It was alive. The closer I came, the more I felt stripped bare, as if nothing in me could be hidden. I wanted to run, but at the same time, I couldn't stop reaching for it. The warmth of it wasn't just physical, it was soul deep, penetrating every part of me that had been so cold and hard while I was alive. Out of the brilliance, a figure emerged. At first, I thought it was only a shadow within the light, but then I saw him, a man, clothed in radiant white, yet scarred and weathered, with a face both stern and full of compassion. His eyes looked straight through me, eyes that carried sorrow, love, and truth so pure I felt crushed by their weight. And then I saw it. On his head rested a crown of thorns, not clean, not symbolic, but real, sharp, bloody, pressed into his brow. It wasn't just an image from a painting or a story I'd mocked. It was raw, agonizing, and undeniable. My first reaction was shame. All the times I had laughed at Christians, ridiculed faith, and dismissed sacrifice came rushing back to me. Here he was, the very one I denied, standing before me with wounds that bore witness to a love I never believed existed. I fell to my knees, or what felt like knees, for I was no longer in a body like before, and I wept. For the first time in my life, my pride shattered completely. The hats I once mocked, the people I sneered at, suddenly made sense. They weren't following a man, or a movement, or a slogan. They were clinging to a hope far greater than politics, a hope that came from this very crown I was now staring at. As I knelt before him, scenes from my life replayed in piercing clarity. I saw myself scrolling through social media, typing sarcastic comments about Bible thumpers and hat wearers. I saw the smirks, the mocking laughter, the times I rolled my eyes whenever someone mentioned prayer or Jesus. Each moment struck me like a blow, not because he condemned me, but because I suddenly understood the wound my words had carried. His face, though filled with compassion, bore sorrow, not for himself, but for me. It was as if every careless word, every cruel joke had been etched into my soul, and now they stood before me, undeniable. I tried to speak, to justify myself. I didn't know, I whispered, trembling, but deep down, I did know. I had heard his name countless times, seen crosses on churches, watched people bow their heads in prayer. I just chose to mock instead of seek. And now, confronted by the very one I had ridiculed, excuses melted into nothingness. The weight of truth pressed down until I felt as though I could not bear it another second. Then he spoke, not with lips moving, but with a voice that resonated inside me. Every crown the world gives fades, but this crown, the one I bore for you, remains forever. His words pierced me deeper than any judgment could. I realized that while I spent my life mocking earthly symbols, he had worn the ultimate symbol of sacrifice for me. The MAGA hats I ridiculed were not my real offense. It was the deeper mockery of hope, of faith, of the God who laid down his life. My laughter had been directed not just at people, but at him. And yet, even as I crumbled under the shame, his presence radiated mercy, as if offering me a choice, to keep resisting or to finally surrender. The longer I looked at him, the more I realized the crown of thorns was not just an ornament of suffering, it was alive with meaning. Each thorn seemed to burn with fire, glowing faintly as though it carried the pain of humanity itself. I could almost hear the cries of the crowd that had mocked him long ago, the hammer striking nails, the jeers of those who thought he was nothing more than a man. And then, in a devastating flash, I heard my own laughter among theirs. I had mocked too. I had joined in that chorus of scorn without even realizing it, adding my voice to the same cruelty that once pressed those thorns deeper into his flesh. I wanted to look away, but he gently lifted my face with nothing more than his gaze. I saw the blood running down his forehead, the quiet dignity in his suffering. He was not angry. He was not vengeful. Instead, his presence radiated an authority that was both terrifying and tender. The thorns were not a sign of defeat. They were a declaration of love, proof that he bore ridicule and pain so that even those who mocked could find redemption. In that moment, the very thing I had despised became the very thing that undid me. Suddenly, I was shown the cross. It towered before me, more real than any painting or movie ever depicted. The weight of it, the rough wood, the nails piercing his hands and feet, all of it was undeniable. I felt as though I was standing at the foot of Golgotha, and the truth of history was no longer just a story, it was unfolding before my very soul. The crown of thorns was not just a relic of the past, it was alive, eternal, a reminder that he chose humiliation so that I could have life. And for the first time, I wanted nothing more than to trade every ounce of my pride, every cruel joke, every arrogant word, for just one drop of the mercy flowing from his wounds. As I stood trembling before the cross, a great expanse opened around me. It wasn't earth nor sky, but a realm where time itself seemed to unravel. And then I saw it, a book, vast and shining, yet heavy with the weight of truth. I somehow knew it was the record of my life. Its pages turned without hands, and every word, every action, every hidden thought was laid bare. Nothing was missing. Nothing could be hidden. I watched as scenes I wanted to forget replayed in terrifying detail. My pride, my arrogance, my mocking of faith, all written as though etched by fire. But woven in among them were moments of kindness too, small acts of love I barely remembered. They shone like tiny sparks, fragile but real. Yet compared to the pride that consumed me, they seemed so few. My heart sank as I realized how much of my life had been wasted chasing things that never mattered, while dismissing the only truth that did. I turned to him, desperate, broken. I expected anger, but instead his eyes met mine with sorrow and longing. "I carried these for you," he said, and I understood that every mocking word I had spoken, every moment of rebellion had already pierced him on the cross. The crown of thorns I saw was not only a symbol of his suffering, but also the price of my redemption. Tears fell, and for the first time, I whispered the words I had resisted all my life. "Forgive me." And in that moment, though the book of my life still stood open, a warmth spread over me that no darkness could overcome. As the light surrounded me, I was suddenly lifted higher, as though being carried above the earth itself. Below, I saw my country, America, stretched out like a vast canvas. Cities pulsed with noise, highways cut across the land, and flags waved from porches. Yet I also saw shadows creeping across the nation, a darkness of division, pride, and hatred that seemed to suffocate hearts. The same spirit that once mocked Jesus was alive and well, clothed in politics, greed, and scorn. Then he showed me something unexpected. I saw ordinary men and women kneeling in prayer, some wearing the very hats I used to mock. But the hats weren't the focus. It was the hearts beneath them. They weren't worshiping a politician, as I had once accused. They were crying out to God, asking for his mercy on a broken land. I saw tears streaming down their faces, hands lifted, not in anger, but in desperate hope. Suddenly, I understood. The crown of thorns I had seen was the true crown, and every earthly symbol, whether red hats, banners, or slogans, meant nothing if not surrendered to him. The vision shifted again, and I saw waves of light spreading from small gatherings of believers. Houses, barns, churches, even street corners where people prayed. These places glowed like fire on the map. The light pushed back the darkness, not with force, but with faith. It wasn't politics that held the answer, but repentance, humility, and trust in the one wearing the crown of thorns. My heart ached as I realized how blind I had been. All my mocking, all my pride had distracted me from the truth. Hope for America would never come from mocking others, but from bowing before the King who bled for all. The vision of America faded, and once again I was standing before him, the man with the crown of thorns, the King I had never believed in. His presence was overwhelming, yet tender. I felt as though my entire soul hung in the balance. Around me stretched two paths, one leading deeper into the light, the other fading into a darkness that promised nothing but separation. I knew without being told that this was the moment where eternity would be decided. He didn't force me. He never raised his voice, never bound me to his will. Instead, he simply looked at me with those eyes, piercing yet merciful, and asked in the gentlest way, "Will you follow me now?" It was a question, not a demand. And in that question, I felt the full weight of freedom. I realized I had spent my whole life mocking, resisting, and ridiculing the very one who now offered me mercy. My pride whispered that it was too late. My shame told me I didn't deserve it. But his gaze told me the truth. The cross had already carried my sins, and the crown of thorns bore my mocking, so I didn't have to. I wept as I answered, "Yes, I will follow." In that instant, the darkness lost its hold and light rushed into every part of me. I felt cleansed as though the book of my life had been washed in his blood. Yet even as joy filled me, he spoke again. "Your time is not finished. You must return." My heart ached at the thought of leaving him, of stepping away from the beauty and love that radiated from his presence. But I understood. He was sending me back, not as the same person who had mocked, but as someone forever marked by the truth of his crown. The moment he spoke that I must return, the light around me began to fade, and I felt myself pulled back with a sudden force. It was like being dropped from heaven into a body I no longer wanted. Pain flooded in, burning lungs, pounding chest, the chaos of voices shouting all around. I gasped violently as paramedics cheered, "We've got her back!" My eyes opened to flashing lights, twisted metal, and faces staring down at me in shock. I was alive, but inside I knew I was not the same. In the hospital, as I lay bandaged and trembling, the visions replayed over and over in my mind. The crown of thorns, the cross, the book of my life. The question he asked, I couldn't escape it, and I didn't want to. The pride that once fueled my mocking was gone. In its place was a trembling reverence and a desperate need to tell others what I had seen. When family and friends came to visit, expecting me to be bitter or broken, I surprised them. My first words weren't about the accident. They were about him. About the one I saw wearing the crown, the one I had mocked, and the mercy he had shown me. Now, when I see someone in a MAGA hat, I don't roll my eyes or sneer. Instead, I see beyond the hat. I see people who may be clinging to a hope I once despised, but who might also be closer to the truth than I ever was. I tell them my story, not to glorify politics, but to point to the King who wore the only crown that matters. He let me taste eternity, and he brought me back with a message. It is never too late to lay down pride, never too late to repent, never too late to see that the crown of thorns is the truest symbol of hope. I died mocking. I returned believing, and now I will never stop telling others what I saw in the light.